Come game hunting today with me to 5 different places in 5 days. First stop is a local Goodwill store where I went straight to the back and ended up finding Madden 25 for the Xbox 360 for $4. Then I kept looking down the shelves in search of other video games where I found a few PS2 games here and there, but most of these were just sports games. So I went to the next rack where I again kind of looked through. I ended up finding a Wii basketball game, which I don't think I've ever played a Wii basketball game, and I never plan to. Then I continued on looking. I didn't really find anything. I ended up finding more sports games, which is a Left 4 Dead 2 for the PC. And then honestly, just kind of stuff that wasn't really interesting here on these bottom shelves. So it is what it is. I saw this Age of Empires 3, which is pretty cool to see, but I've already got the game and I don't really need it. And then I checked this last section here, and again, more sports games for the PS2, which is kind of a bummer, but that is what it is. Then I headed back towards the back where I ended up finding the Sonic clock, which was pretty cool, and this nasty looking Wii Fit board for $6. That cover used to be clear. Ugh. Even though day one was kind of a bummer at this Goodwill, we still have 4 more days to go, so let's check out day two. Day two, I ended up going to this Easy Pawn shop, and I made my way in, and I went right to the glass case that has all the video games here. And honestly, this is a pretty empty case this time. Usually there's a bunch of PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 games, occasionally some Xbox 360 games or PS2 games, but nothing really here that's catching my eye. So I kind of looked a little bit around some more, but then I made my way back to the back where they have a bunch of different consoles here. And again, there was nothing really that was jumping out to me until I ended up finding Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl for the Nintendo Switch. This was only $10, and when I saw it, I just knew I had to grab it. So for $10, I ended up picking this game up. I do not have this for the Switch, so I saw $10 and I figured, why not pick it up? This game's worth around 15, so I feel like that's a good deal. I don't see too many Switch games for $10 in my area, so I figured I'd grab this. Day 3, I headed back to my local Goodwill store after the rain, and usually by now they restock, and you can definitely tell they've done some of that. First off, Create for the Wii and Wii Fit here. Okay, whatever, not really interesting to me. I did see this backyard basketball for the PS2, and I looked at it, but ultimately I did end up putting it back. It just wasn't worth picking up, and I think I already have it for my collection anyways, so I left it behind, but if anyone else wants it, I guess pick it up there. Then I kind of checked out this other place where I ended up finding Ghost Recon, but again, a big box PC game or a small box PC game that I wasn't really interested in. A Zumba game I'm definitely not interested in picking up. And then kind of just kept looking through here. Again, at the very bottom, you can see this cool Age of Empires, but I don't need it. So ultimately, unfortunately, I have to put it back, but I absolutely love that game. Then I found an NHL 97 for the PC, which was kind of an interesting find here. Again, I thought that was something good, but it wasn't. A basketball game for the Xbox One that I have no want or need to grab. And then down here was a few PS2 games. This Ace Combat game, which I already have, so I left it behind. But then I ended up finding NBA Street. This is the PlayStation 2 Greatest Hits version. And of course, when you find games out in the wild, you've got to always check that the disc is at least in there. And it is. And so for $3.99, I figured I had to pick this up because this is such an awesome game. Now, I already have this in my collection, and I'll probably end up putting it for like trade whenever I actually go to do something with it. But I figured NBA Street for $3.99 is an absolute steal. This game's worth like $8 to $10, which is pretty decent considering I found this at a Goodwill store. So I'm feel like for the first pickup of this video, NBA Street is definitely well worth picking up. If you haven't played it before, you definitely should. That leads me to day number 4, which is a Needful Things like flea market booth place. First thing I found was this Super Mario pin, but honestly, that is a huge pin and I do not need it. I ended up finding this Marvel Superhero Squad for the Wii. I've never actually played this game, so it caught my eye, but for $7, it's a little too much. I think I have it at home anyway, so I'll definitely give that a try soon. I saw this Sonic figure, but for $5, I feel like the condition on this wasn't worth it, so I left it behind. And I went to this same booth, or this another booth from the same owner, and ended up finding this derpy looking Sonic for $13. If this was like $3 or $4, I definitely would have picked it up, but not for $8. I just couldn't do it. Then I went to their back booth. They have like 3 or 4 booths here from the same owner, and I ended up finding Kinect Sports Ultimate Collection for the Xbox 360. I know this is a sports game, but it was like $4 and it's worth like 10. So I went ahead and grabbed this. It's got 2 games in one. I'll definitely have to get my Kinect set up soon. This glass case had a few Game Boy Advance games that no one will ever buy. And then this other glass case had a few games here and there, but like Pool for the Super Nintendo, no one's buying that, especially not for that price. So I left it behind. Then I made my way to the overpriced booth. An overpriced Wii, another overpriced Wii, an overpriced Nintendo 64, and then down below they even had more overpriced stuff like this PlayStation 1 console and more Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis stuff. Just these things were definitely not worth it. This booth is way too expensive if you look back at those prices that are just like $50 to $100 more than they should be, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the only game I ended up picking up on day 4 ended up being Kinect Sports, which is probably a game that I probably wouldn't pick up randomly, but Kinect Sports Ultimate Collection has both Kinect Sports games on it, and for $7, which was 40% off, was like $4. I figured I'd go ahead and grab this. This game is worth about $8 to $10 as well, and I don't actually have this for my collection, and I've been buying a ton of Xbox 360 games lately. I'm absolutely loving collecting them, by the way. But for $4, I figured I have to grab this. I've been grabbing so many Xbox 360 games. It was just one of those that when I saw it, I saw the price and I had to grab it. And that brings us to day number 5, which I went to Next Generations, which is another like antique booth place. The first thing I saw was this booth that had this really cool blow up Yoshi and Mario costume. Unfortunately, it was for a kid and $20. If this was an adult costume, I might have actually picked it up, but I didn't. This is the same booth that I've recently been to that had a bunch of overpriced video games here. They're in pretty rough condition, especially this Mario Kart game for the 3DS. $15 for a sun-faded one just isn't worth it. And those other Guitar Hero games are about what they should be. And this Guitar Hero guitar on the bottom, which is a knockoff, is still here, but right in the same booth, I ended up finding Mullet Man Luigi, who lost his cap and is definitely balding. Just look at that hairline. It's kind of receding a little bit there. But then I ended up continuing on here where I found this one booth, which I've seen somewhere else here, but they've recently moved and everything is overpriced. $185 for a PlayStation 2 with like 3 games that are worth like $20. Just not worth it at all. This booth had some decent stuff, but those prices were not decent at all. They were like 25% more than they should have been, which is just crazy. I made my way to the owner of the store's booth where he has a bunch of video games, but honestly, these are pretty much the same games that have been here for the last like 2 or 3 times. I don't think he's gotten a restock lately, which is kind of a bummer, but I still like to check it out. If you had something I wanted to pick up, I definitely would. I love supporting this place, so anytime I can find something I want, I go ahead and grab it. I was actually looking at this Lost Planet game for the Xbox 360 here, and for $5 it was a really good deal. But then I looked and I actually have this game in my collection already. So unfortunately, I left it behind, and I saw all these Xbox 360 spines here, but these are all games that no one wants. They're just sports games. So I continued on to some more booths where I ended up finding these PS5 games here. These kind of are those games that I saw at that indoor swap meet last week, which is kind of funny to me. But then I ended up checking this booth right here back in the back. This booth is dwindling in games here. There's only like 10 to 12 here. And then I ended up spotting this NES console for $25. Now, it didn't have any cords or anything, but when I looked it up, they're worth like 45 to 50 in this condition. So I figured I'd grab it and risk it and see if this was worth it or not. And then above it, they had this Mario mug, which I thought was pretty cool until I realized they wanted $15. So, I got out of there really quickly and continued on. This Wheel of Fortune plug and play caught my eye, and a few sports games, but nothing worth picking up here. There was a few sports games in this booth as well, and this Coleco handheld, which I thought was pretty cool, but honestly, this would just take up space on my shelves, so I left it behind. I don't think I'd ever play it. Then this Guitar Hero World Tour caught my eye, but a little too expensive for my taste, so I got out of there pretty quickly, and I ended up picking up this NES console for $25, but let's go ahead and test this thing out and plug it in and see if it at least turns on.
One eternity later.
I've got the cord here, so let's go ahead and plug it in. And there's a red light, which is totally awesome. Now, it is blinking, but these things are tanks, so I'll get this checked out and be pretty happy with it. For $25, this was definitely worth it, but what do you think about my week of game hunting? Honestly, I didn't find too much, and definitely not anything crazy, but definitely glad to add these games for 30 to $40 I paid for all of this. This definitely works. These games should work. If not, I can clean them up. But honestly, for $40 and a week worth of spent game hunting, I think this was pretty all right. Now, you're not always going to hit home runs every week, but finding games for this price, I think, is definitely worth it. But I'm going to get out of here because I've got to test these and clean them and everything else. But comment down below what you think about this. Check out that video out if you haven't already. But honestly, I feel like the Switch game is probably the best deal. Maybe the NES console, actually. But overall, I'm pretty happy about these finds. So comment down below and let me know what you think about them. But I'm getting out of here, so check that video out if you haven't already.